tempo está a chegar ao fim e por isso vamos para o último painel do dia. Passo a palavra a Jorge Pereira, da Eurocontrol.
And for this panel, we have three distinguished guests, two of them based in Brussels as well, and one in Spain. Mr. Ramon Raposo from the Cesar Deployment Manager, Mr. Paul Bosman, my colleague here in the Eurocontrol, and Mr. Pablo Aro from ISDEFE. I will introduce them in more detail as I pass the floor later on. Myself, I work in the Eurocontrol as the head of the Civil Military CNS unit since 2002. And before, I worked 20 years in the Portuguese Air Force. Here I work in an area related with civil military interoperability. And for today, I would like just to set the scene, highlighting that despite of the COVID crisis, we believe that there will be a day after, and this will be a temporary crisis. So it means we need to make the aviation system to evolve in accordance with the vision from ICAO, global plans from ICAO, and also the European vision in the European ATM Master Plan. And this vision is a response to challenges in terms of traffic, road capacity, safety, the need to reduce the environmental impact and reduce costs, and also to the need to have a more robust and more interoperable and rationalized system in place. And this modernization of the aviation infrastructure in Europe will be based on what we call digitalization, increased automation, connectivity, in practical terms, through the introduction of the use of satellite technologies, air-ground data links, and a network-centric information-rich environment on the ground on the basis of what we call system-wide information management. Now, this modernization of the aviation infrastructure has different dimensions. So we have a regulatory dimension normally covered by the Commission in the context of the Single European Sky Initiative. There is also a research dimension usually covered through the Single European Sky ATM Research Program, Cesar, and more focusing on short-term benefits and short-term improvements, deployment to actually put in place, let's say, the enablers for the operational improvements and the concepts that we want to introduce. So the objective for today is a little bit to give you an overview of such deployment initiatives and our activities. And for that purpose, we start with Ramon Raposo from the Cesar Deployment Manager, where Ramon works at the SDM as the execution manager of the Cesar Deployment Program. And as such, he coordinates a huge number of implementation projects, so more than 350 projects across Europe, targeting really the execution of the regulation related with the deployment, the so-called Pilot Common Project Regulation that we have in place. So these programs, let's say, involve huge budgets, more than 3 billion euros investments from the ATM stakeholders and 1.5 euros in European Union grants. So with that, I pass the floor to Ramon to deliver his presentation. Ramon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jorge, and obrigado to the organizers for the chance to present about the good work carried out by the Cesar Deployment Manager and operational stakeholders from the ATM community. It's an honor to be here. I just have a few elements to support our conversation, which I hope you can see in my screen, because I want to start by explaining what is the Cesar Deployment Manager. The Cesar Deployment Manager was established in 2014 and is responsible for the coordination of the implementation of those essential operational improvements from Cesar through the concept of common projects. EU member states are mandated by law to implement the Pilot Common Project Regulation, which is the current regulation in place. The SDM role is covered by the Cesar Deployment Alliance, composed by operational stakeholders, which you can see in the screen, representing ANSPs, airport operators, and airspace users, ensuring know-how, building, and commitment by the ATM community. And building on these elements, the Cesar deployment is progressing well in a coordinated way. Let me tell you about the Cesar deployment and how it is governed. The Cesar Deployment Manager works under the oversight of the policy level, which is led by the European Commission, who is responsible for issuing, amending the common projects, awarding EU funds in support of its deployment, as well as selecting the Cesar Deployment Manager. As you might be aware, the Pilot Common Project Regulation is in the process of being amended through the Common Project 1, CP1, which is expected to be adopted at the end of next year. The Cesar Deployment Manager function, responsible for the management level, we have as core tasks, we develop and implement the Cesar Deployment Program, which I will tell you more a little bit later, coordinating stakeholders in the deployment of the activities and implement specific Commission decisions. On the implementation level, we have the implementing partners who are responsible for the timely execution of the common projects. They are really the core of the implementation, and they do so through the realization of implementation projects carried out under the SDM coordination. As you can see, this includes airspace users, air navigation service providers, military authorities, airport operators, med providers, and of course, the network manager. I've already briefly mentioned one key pillar on this implementation, which is the Cesar deployment program. Let's see how we get to it. The common project is an extraction from the European ATM master plan, which is based on mature solutions which need to be deployed in a synchronized and timely manner across Europe. Based on the regulation in place, the SDM, ourselves, we elaborate the Cesar deployment program, which is an important element because it represents the blueprint for the ATM investment plans of the stakeholders. It's the guidance for the stakeholders to deliver timely and in a synchronized approach described in the document families, and it reports on the status of the implementation, identifying what is left to be deployed where by which stakeholder. This is important to be emphasized because this material is later on used as a guidance for future European funding on projects deploying the Pilot Common Project. Once CP1 is adopted, SDM, we will elaborate a new Cesar deployment program in 2021 hoping to achieve the same objectives as you can see in the slide. Let's go into specificities. The ATM functionalities, which is the little detail of the PCP. The PCP is composed of 6 ATM functionalities. We have in ATM functionality number 1 of AF1, the extension of the arrival management horizon, mainly aimed at improving, traffic flows and reducing holding times. Also, we have performance-based navigation implementation in high-density TMA. I am sure Pablo will be eager to tell us more later about some BBN elements. In AF2, we are working to implement several elements related to the airport throughput and integration into the network. Now that we are speaking about digitalization, we have elements such as the electronic flight strips, which is a key element facilitating the information sharing across air traffic control centers. In AF3, we have advanced flexible use of airspace amongst airspace users together with hand-in-hand with implementation of free route airspace above flight level 310. In AF4, we deal with the collaborative network operations plan and also short-term measures for a more efficient planning to optimize traffic flows. And now I get to the last 2 AF functionalities of the PCP, which are really key for from a digital perspective. Initial swim, or AF5, is the system-wide information management. I was following the previous panels, and I could hear that they were making reference to how relevant it is. The aim is to increase the cost effectiveness of the air navigation service provision and building the foundation of the digital digital European sky. Finally, on AF6, we have another pillar on the digital backbone of the European sky, which is the initially trajectory information sharing. This is aimed at improving predictability of flight operations. For this, data link services are a must-have prerequisite. And on top right corner, you can see that I have highlighted two elements: the DLS, the Data Link Services Implementation Strategy, and the ADSB Implementation Program. DG Move appointed the Cesar Deployment Manager with the role of the DLS Implementation Project Manager, with the aim to develop a recovery plan for the data link service implementation in Europe. Excellent, I can say, and I am very happy to say so, that excellent results have been reached in a few years by defining both transitional solutions and the target architecture. The next steps are now related to facilitate the operational use of DLS in conjunction, in coordination with NM, and define the overall AF6 deployment strategy. On the ADSB, also, DG Move requested the SDM to coordinate and accelerate this ADSB adoption across Europe, and this coordination between ANSPs, airspace users, and also SDM on the loop together with Eurocontrol produced significant improvements in the percentage of ADSB-equipped aircraft. I want to emphasize that in these particular 2 points, during last year, SDM and Eurocontrol have been working together on the technical and operational dimensions, and the results are really tangible. I am sure that Paul will want to develop a little bit further on this. Where are we in the implementation of the PCP, I would like to say now? From more than 1,000 ground gaps, a gap is defined a combination of a technical or operational element together with geographical location. The PCP activities completed or in progress to be completed are currently 75%. This means a 6% increase in comparison with last year's value. And this really proves that despite of all the difficulties faced this year by the operational stakeholders, the Cesar deployment is still moving forward. It can only be seen that the contribution of the European funds through the Connecting Europe Facility funding instruments is heavily supporting these programs, this progress. And there are some other elements that can be highlighted, such as the full implementation of some of the families, like the direct routings towards free route, STAN Phase 1 and PENGS 1. Also, now that we speak about PENGS and we speak about digitalization, there was a very relevant, very significant achievement which led to the synchronized deployment of the new PENGS family with 26 countries plus the network manager completing the migration to new PENGS during 2020. In parallel with the previous, the SDM not only acts as the Cesar deployment manager, we are also working the role of framework partnership management. This is particularly relevant with regards to the European funds and the funding mechanisms. The SDM, we are the framework partnership agreement, which means that whenever a new call for proposal is launched by INEA, which is the agency dealing with the CEF funds, the SDM coordinates the gathering of the proposals as long as they target the pilot common project, and we work as an advisor to the implementing partners. We monitor the execution of the projects grouped under an action until its closure, which includes reporting, payment, checks, and audits. And finally, just a picture to illustrate all the implementing partners. If you can see in my live video, I'm not sure if that's been shown, but you can see that you can notice that it's pretty important, this picture with a prominent presence in my office. Currently, the SDM is coordinating 8 actions, which include 343 implementation projects implemented by 93 beneficiaries. This means almost 3 billion euros of investments and 1.26 billion of EU grants. In conclusion, I will stop sharing my screen. In conclusion, what I want to say is that the Cesar deployment is progressing well, 75% as we saw, and in a coordinated way with all the operational stakeholders. We are also looking forward in further collaboration with Eurocontrol on subjects where the industry, the know-how, the coordinated technology deployment and the operational dimensions, which are key to the network, are put together for the benefit of the entire ATM community. We aim that the synergies of working together are more and more exploited, looking together into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramon. Without any further delay, and as you say that there are some complementary activities on deployment conducted in the context of the Eurocontrol, I introduce the next speaker, Paul Bosman. Paul is head of a new division within the Network Manager Directorate in the Eurocontrol, the ATM Infrastructure Division. And Paul has more than 25 years of Eurocontrol, and he works in close cooperation with ATM stakeholders to manage and support European ATM CNS planning, deployment, reporting and monitoring. The key activities in this domain are CNS, including CPDLC, ADS, and PBN deployment, SWIM, EAD, cyber, and so on. Paul, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, George, and good evening, everybody. I am very grateful for this opportunity to speak to all of you. I know it's late in the evening, so I will do all my best to entertain you, and will not dwell too much on all the fantastic things that we're doing all together in Europe in terms of modernizing the European ATM. Because modernization is indeed very much required, and Ramon already gave you a very good overview of the different tools, the project management, the financing, etc., that is available to all of you to benefit from and see how we can then truly build the digital future together. Now, to understand a little bit further about what is it that we're talking about when we mention this word infrastructure, I pulled a couple of slides together for you to get a bit more insight into the whole thing. So first of all, let's start with the communication, surveillance, and navigation infrastructure of Europe. At the bottom, you see the link where you can find all the details yourself. But I think I would just like to summarize this slide by saying that the CNS infrastructure in Europe is an expensive activity. It's costing at the moment 1.3 billion euro. And what you see from our predictions is that those costs are only going to increase in the coming years. And if you then realize that we're going through the biggest aviation crisis ever, then you start to understand that it's very important that we work even better together in the future to see how we can tackle this still quite fragmented infrastructure with quite a bit of redundancy in the system and probably too much redundancy in the system, and see how together we can provide a more efficient service to the different airspace users. Now, how do we do that? What are the different activities to keep an eye on the infrastructure? Now, one thing that I really wanted to mention to all of you is the example of surveillance. The aircraft are flying around Europe. They are seen by different radars, antennas, different means to make sure that we know where the aircraft are projected on the screen of air traffic. However, when 1 or 2 years ago we did some test flights over the core parts of Europe, we found out that in many places in Europe, there are actually way too many of these radars and antennas interrogating, so to say, the aircraft that are flying around. And that means that the transponders, the equipment that is on board of aircraft, is starting to have all sorts of funny behaviors. These things are made to deal with, let's say, maximum 40 or 50 replies a second. And if they get interrogated by more than that per second, then you either get no reply, you get a reply to the interrogation from the neighbor, etc. And what can happen then is that the air traffic controller gets false information, or even worse, gets no information on his screen of the air traffic on the aircraft that he is supposed to control at that moment. So then again, we sat around the table with all the stakeholders and they said, okay, it is time that we start doing something about this. So together with the industry, we developed some very specific equipment, some specific antennas that can measure where all these interrogations are taking place, where they're coming from, with what type of power, etc. And then we can start doing some improvements. So we developed not only one, we actually developed dozens of these antennas, and we are deploying them as we talk at the moment over the whole of Europe. Their information is being collected at a central place in Europe, and out of that we are then able to provide statistics, heat maps, to get really accurate information about the problems. When we see a specific problem, we even are able to react in real time. We pick up the phone, we talk to the specific country and say, oi, you really have a real safety issue going on at the moment. We've got national points of contact in the whole of Europe. We will contact each of them where required. And also on a very systematic basis, we put all of those people together around the table and we discuss together what can be done to alleviate any of these problems. And that could be less radars, maybe reducing the power a little bit, maybe updating some of the software on board of the aircraft. But again, all of us working together to make sure that the right things are done. And again, that's also where this funding that Ramon already talked about earlier comes in really handy, and it shows the importance of working closely together between operations and deployment in Europe. Now, this was just one particular example that I gave to you, but we equally do this for navigation data, certainly with respect to GPS jamming and spoofing, etc., for communications, and Ramon already talked about data link, where we keep a very close eye on how data link is being deployed over Europe, and as well cybersecurity. Because cybersecurity, and that is now the focus of my next slide, is really an issue. It is on one hand fantastic that we're going for a modern digital world, and it's bringing lots of benefits in terms of scalability, in terms of cost efficiency, of safety, etc. But it also comes with an increasing amount of risks. Risks generated by hackers who are intentionally or sometimes unintentionally are targeting also our aviation industry. And it's not that they particularly are targeting our industry, it is just they try to hack any computer that they can find and try to get in, get the root access, take control, etc. So that's why we, again, together with the stakeholders in Eurocontrol, have developed what we call a Cyber EATM, Computer Emergency Response Team, an EATM CERT. And that's where we create alerts, we have a credential leak service, so if we are aware through whatever source, sometimes the gray internet, sometimes the dark web internet, about leaked passwords and user accounts, we make that information known to people. We provide a penetration test service. So if any of you ever want our ethical hackers to come along, we are happy to come and test if we can enter your systems and tell you all the results, whether they are cyber secure or not. We have big platforms to sharing informations. There's also lots of emails always going around of people trying to impersonate Eurocontrol and then claiming that a certain airline didn't pay its route charges yet. There are document leaks, and I just want to give you one example also at the bottom right of the screen. I mean, all of us are working a lot with contractors and subcontractors to work on the buildings that we occupy, etc. And these subcontractors are not always necessarily using your information with a lot of care. They put it on their own website or on an FTP site, etc. And what then happens, that people who are really malicious, they get access to the blueprints of your building. They know where the camera surveillance is. They know where the air conditioning systems are. And imagine that you take out an air conditioning from a building, certainly in southern parts of Europe, then all of a sudden the computers get overheated and they can bring down your whole system. So again, this is just one example. And if any of you is interested to benefit from all our free services in terms of cybersecurity, then again, don't hesitate to contact us. Another topic that I really wanted to bring to your attention is artificial intelligence. We had, over the last year, a group called the European Aviation Artificial Intelligence High-Level Group with representatives from all around the community, whereby we basically demystified and started to accelerate artificial intelligence in our domain. So this document, which is a free download, I really recommend all of you to have a look at. It describes, I think, very well what artificial intelligence is, how is it already used in air traffic management today, and we found dozens of applications that are already operational in Europe at the moment. We identify business cases as well as business challenges for any further uptake, and we have a whole series of recommendations for everybody to pick up and see how we can better work together to, again, modernize, digitize European ATM infrastructure. All this to say that we do all this work in very close partnership with any of the airlines, the ANSPs, the airports, the military colleagues, etc. And we're happy to continue to serve you in the future and also happy to reply to any questions you may have. George, I give you the floor back now.
Thank you, Paul. I think this was really important and clear on the importance of the network functions and the wide range of domains that are covered. And I propose to turn our attention now to the satellite-based navigation, global navigation satellite services developments. So we have with us Pablo Aro from ISDEFE, Spain. Pablo works as a consultant also next to the European Satellite Navigation Agency, GSA, and his activities relate with EGNOS and Galileo, the use of EGNOS and Galileo for aviation, in particular to support functions like search and rescue, as well as drone communications. And Pablo has more than 25 years experience in air navigation domain, working at the European Commission, GSA, Cesar joint undertaking, the European Satellite Service Provider, as well as in the Spanish Civil Aviation Authority and the Spanish Air Navigation Service Provider, ENAIR. Pablo is assistant professor at the Aerospace Engineering Department of the UC3M University, and is an expert contributing to the Horizon 2020 program. Pablo, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, George, for your kind words, and also thank you to the organizers of this important event. I will share my presentation. Okay, so I have prepared a few slides concerning EGNOS, the European Satellite-Based Augmentation System, and I will address very briefly the current level of the EGNOS services, the expected evolution, and also the operational use in the frame of the performance-based navigation, and also finally some funding aspects. So this is, well, I took this picture from the Safety of Life service definition document, which explains and defines what aviation user can expect from EGNOS. As you know, EGNOS is an augmentation on top of GPS, and today it's complementing and providing enhanced services based on GPS and L1 frequency. So in this map, we have the Lpv2 Availability Map. So we see that essentially all the flight information regions in Europe are covered with this service level. Lpv2 corresponds to the navigation specification RMP approach. So essentially it is an flight operation which is equivalent to an ILS Cat1. So the obstacles permitting the airplane can fly down to a decision height of 200 feet above the runway threshold. So essentially, it's, as I said, it's equivalent to ILS Cat1 without the need of having any radio navigation infrastructure at a particular runway. And now concerning the evolution, we are evolving towards a dual frequency multi-constellation SBAS. So today EGNOS is complementing just one constellation, GPS, and one frequency, L1. And in the second half of this decade, the plan is to evolve towards a dual frequency multi-constellation SBAS. So by doing this, we will have a number of benefits. We will have enlarged service areas. We will have increased performances in terms of integrity, availability, and continuity. And the third point is also very important, increased robustness, considering the potential interference that we may have in L1 or in the L5 frequency bands that are the ones that we are using in aviation, since they are within the aeronautical radio navigation spectrum. If you want to have more information, I have included the website of the ESSP, where you can freely download this document, and you have all the details of all the service levels that you can have by using EGNOS in Europe. Concerning the current operational use, concerning the flight procedures that we have in Europe, as of today, we have more than 700 EGNOS-based instrument approach procedures deployed throughout Europe, in more than 370 airports also including some helipads. So we have to take into account that we have the PVN implementing rule and also the pilot common project. So by considering these two mandates, we should have all European instrument runway ends in Europe with these procedures based on the RMP approach navigation specification. And today we have a bit more than 50% of the instrument runways in Europe. Concerning the equipage of the users of the airlines, well, also across all market sectors in aviation, we have in total more than 20% of European registered aircraft that are equipped with SBAS avionics. So these airplanes are able to fly the RMP approach navigation specification down to the LPV minima line. The level of equipage is different considering each specific sector. If we consider the business aviation, we are in the order of 50% of European registered aircraft. In general aviation, it's more than 30%, and it's somehow a bit still low in the commercial and regional aviation segments. It's low, but still it's growing. And concerning the benefits, well, with EGNOS is augmenting GPS L1, and it's of course able to support the whole flight profile of a flight from airport A to airport B. So we can fly the departure, the en route, and also the arrival and the instrument approach at the destination airport. As I said, in the world of PBN, the pertinent navigation specification is RMP approach, and we can fly down to the 3 lines of minima: LNAV, LNAV, VNAV, and also LPV. That's the key added value of EGNOS, because we are without the need of installing any ILS at a specific runway. We can fly down to LPV, and in most of Europe down to 200 feet above the runway threshold, with both horizontal and vertical instrument guidance. And well, in that document I mentioned earlier, the EGNOS Safety of Life service definition document, you can see that EGNOS is actually supporting all the navigation specifications. So we can fly operations in the terminal area and also the instrument approaches down to the LPV minima line. And finally, concerning the funding aspects, you may know that in Europe we have different instruments to support both aerodromes willing to deploy and to promulgate an instrument approach procedure based on EGNOS, and also the airspace users, airlines, and all the users of operators, aircraft operators in general, to equip with the corresponding avionics. So you have in this program, aviation grant program, you may have up to 60% of funding to address specific implementations along those lines of action. So you may have support for deployment of RMP approaches down to LPV minima, in point in space in the case of helicopters. And then now concerning the avionics, forward fit, retrofit, development of service bulletin of SDCs, and also any potential additional enablers such as using or proposing new ideas concerning using EGNOS in the frame of drones and other navigation specifications. You have all the information in that website from the European GNSS Agency. So I invite you to have a look at this website. So to conclude, I will say that EGNOS is today an important element of the European navigation infrastructure. It's supporting the navigation function, but it's also, of course, a very reliable positioning source for in the frame of surveillance for ADS-B out. It's an important element that will be even more important in the future when we migrate to dual frequency multi-constellation scenario. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you, yours.
Thank you, Pablo. I'm looking to the chat box to see if there are any questions from the floor. So if there are questions, if I see any indication in the chat box, we can address any questions that may pop up in the meantime. I would like just to complement what has been presented with one remark on the need to take on board all the stakeholders, and in particular a word for the military. Normally the military have a legitimate role related with national defense and security missions. And what we see more and more is that the military need to exchange more information with the civil, and need to fly to conduct operations that are supported by common infrastructure. So then when we modernize the infrastructure on the civil side, this somehow impacts also military operations. So we are working then to ensure that we have an appropriate level of civil-military coordination, and this includes the military involvement since the beginning in the Single European Sky or in the Cesar research or in the deployment activities. And we're also trying permanently to identify, to define interoperability solutions that reduce the cost or the technical impact for the military on the basis of innovative approaches related with the reutilization of some capabilities that are available. So the military dimension also considered in the work of all these organizations. I don't see any questions from the floor. I would summarize then the information that we have shared today with you. From the Cesar deployment manager, Ramon identified the domains where deployment is being organized ongoing. He highlighted the network-centric infrastructure that we need to have in place, the system-wide information management, the data link services that need to be organized, avoiding the provider aborts that were happening before, and also a plan to actually implement ADS-B in line with the regulation 1207/2011. From Paul, we really understood that it's not enough to deploy new infrastructure elements. It's also important to ensure that the infrastructure works with the appropriate level of performance, and we need to ensure that we can monitor performance of the infrastructure, and we avoid let's say problems as we had in 2016 in the center of Europe, where a huge number of tracks were disappearing from the scopes of the ATC controllers because of 1030, 1090 frequency band congestion. And what you said for surveillance, for me, is also valid for RVSM and navigation, GNSS jamming, monitoring, and all that. So very important. Paul highlighted also the relevance of cybersecurity. So today we focus a lot on the robustness and resilience of network, and there are new challenges there that are introduced by automation connectivity. And finally, Paul mentioned the artificial intelligence. So it's a new domain that will become more important for aviation. Pablo then describes the value of EGNOS as an augmentation system. We never use satellite signals directly. They need to be corrected through augmentation systems. And in this case, the space-based overlay system that is EGNOS enables advanced applications for performance-based navigation that we are implementing in Europe. We had some time ago a lot of secondary airports only with horizontal guidance. So this allows us to add vertical guidance, and so to enhance safety, in fact, in these aerodromes. Pablo highlighted that the level of deployment for, let's say, LPV infrastructure is increasing, and also the equipage levels are becoming much better than before. And very important, the identified funding opportunities there to incentivize not only ground deployment, but also, let's say, in terms of avionics, the equipage, appropriate equipage, although we already have a certain level of equipage available. So I think this summarizes a little bit what was presented here. Despite we are a bit late in the afternoon when we are the latest entertainers, I believe this information gives a bit a broader overview of what is happening in terms of aviation modernization. So I still see no questions in the box, in the chat box. No surprise. I don't know if any of you, the participants, want to say any final words. If not, I think we have delivered our message. Thanks a lot for listening us, and for the participants. Thanks a lot for presenting and for sharing the important information with us. Nice evening, everybody, and stay safe.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.